I answered because it kept buzzing. That's the thing no one tells you about the moment your life splits in two. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. No dramatic music, no slow motion realization. It arrives because your husband left his phone on the nightstand and went to shower, and it kept buzzing, and you reached over half asleep and answered it because you assumed it was his mother, and you were going to take a message, and then you were going to go back to sleep. I pressed the phone to my ear, and a woman's voice, low, warm, conspiratorial in the way of someone sharing a delicious secret, said 4 words that rearranged every assumption I had ever made about my life. She'll never suspect a thing. I knew the voice before she finished the sentence. I'd known that voice since I was 7 years old. I'd slept next to it at sleepovers and cried into it at funerals and laughed until I couldn't breathe at inside jokes that went back 20 years. I'd stood next to it at an altar 3 years ago while it called my husband the best man I've ever chosen for you. Dana, my cousin, my maid of honor, my childhood best friend. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the phone. I didn't do any of the things that, in retrospect, would have made an understandable amount of sense. I pressed the phone harder against my ear, and Marcus, my husband, the man currently singing an off-key version of something vaguely resembling an Ed Sheeran song in our master bathroom shower, said, in a voice I hadn't heard him use with me in months, "Saturday is perfect. She'll be at her mother's all weekend." Low, warm, intimate. I set the phone down exactly where I found it. I walked to the bathroom door. I stood there, and I listened to him sing. And I started planning. My name is Caroline Whitfield. I'm 34 years old. I'm a senior compliance analyst at a mid-sized financial services firm in Atlanta, which means, professionally speaking, I spend my days finding things people have tried to hide in plain sight. I am methodical by training and by temperament. I believe in documentation. I believe in evidence. I believe deeply and perhaps unfashionably in the idea that the truth is always findable if you're willing to look carefully enough and wait long enough. I had been married to Marcus Whitfield for 3 years and together with him for 5. We met the way people meet in their late 20s when they've stopped expecting it, through friends, at a birthday party, over a drink I wasn't going to finish because I had an early meeting the next day. He was tall and funny and paid attention to things most men I'd dated considered decorative details. He remembered the name of my college roommate. He asked follow-up questions. He showed up consistently in all the small ways that turn into love before you've noticed the accumulation. I loved him genuinely and without reservation. That is the part of this story that still hurts most. Dana had been my person since childhood. We were the same age. Our mothers were sisters. We'd grown up in adjacent houses in Decatur and shared everything from biology notes to bridesmaid dresses. When I started dating Marcus, she was the first person I called. When he proposed, she was the first person I told. She was standing beside me in a blush pink dress at the ceremony, tears tracking mascara down her face, and she looked at me with those familiar eyes and mouthed, "You deserve this." She had been dating Derek Ossie for 2 years at the time of my wedding. A good man, Derek, quiet, steady, an architect with a dry sense of humor and genuine kindness. He was in love with her completely and without complication. He'd proposed 6 months ago. The engagement party had been at our house. At the engagement party, Marcus had given a toast. I thought about that now, standing at the bathroom door, listening to the shower run. 11 months, I would later find out. 11 months. Dana had been sitting across from me at family dinners while an entire parallel life was running simultaneously, a second channel playing in the background that I had no idea existed. The shower turned off. I walked back to the bedroom and picked up my own phone and texted my friend Priya, "Are you awake? Need to talk." Her response came in 40 seconds. Always. What happened? Not a question, a statement. Because Priya Shankar, senior systems engineer at a cybersecurity firm and the most practically intelligent person I have ever known, doesn't waste time on preamble. She assessed the tone of my 3 words and dispensed with pleasantries accordingly. I told her everything, 4 minutes flat, in the calm, flat affect of someone who hasn't yet processed the full dimensions of what they know, but is already past the part where they fall apart. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Are you sure?" or "Are you okay?" or any of the things that, while well-intentioned, would have been entirely useless to me at that moment. She said, "How long do you need?" I said, 2 weeks. She said, "Done." Marcus came back into the bedroom, towel around his shoulders, and found me sitting up in bed scrolling my phone. He kissed me on the forehead. I said good morning. We ate breakfast and he told me about a project at work, and I nodded in appropriate places and contributed sentences that must have been coherent because he didn't notice anything unusual. And behind my eyes, very quietly, I began. Here is something I want you to understand about the 2 weeks that followed. I did not spiral. I know that's not the expected response. I know what people imagine when they picture a woman finding out her husband and her best friend have been conducting an affair for nearly a year. The confrontations, the tears, the screaming matches at 2 a.m., the dramatic departure with suitcases thrown into a car. I understand the impulse. I have nothing against people who respond to betrayal that way, but I am a compliance analyst. I build cases. And the first rule of building a case is this: you do not move until the evidence is complete. You do not tip your hand. You do not let the subjects know they're under investigation, because the moment they know, the documents disappear and the story changes and suddenly nothing you know is provable. Marcus had given me his passwords years ago. Email, cloud storage, the works, back when we were in our first year together, and he'd had a health scare that required someone to access his accounts from the road, and he'd written them on a post-it in that casual, unself-conscious way of a man who has nothing to hide. He'd never change them. That was his first mistake. I did not snoop frantically. I moved carefully, methodically. I set aside 2 hours each day. At work, on a secured device Priya had set up with no traceable connection to anything in my name, and I went through everything with the systematic patience of someone auditing a financial portfolio for fraud, because that's exactly what it was. Screenshot by screenshot, date by date, hotel receipts, 11 of them, over 11 months. The first one, a Tuesday afternoon in late January, at a Marriott 30 minutes outside Atlanta. The kind of transaction that would look like a routine business stay to anyone who wasn't looking closely. I was looking closely. Text threads on an app I'd never heard of. Priya found it embedded in Marcus's cloud backup under a folder labeled podcasts. She sent me the contents without comment. I read them the way I read compliance reports, with my analyst brain fully engaged, the emotional processing suspended behind a door I was deliberately keeping closed. I needed the information first. The feelings could come later, when the work was done. What I found was this. They had started in January of last year. What appeared to have begun as something I will not detail here because the specific anatomy of their betrayal is theirs and mine and not for public consumption, had escalated into something that was, by March, an ongoing and deliberate double life. They had coordinated around my schedule. They had discussed me. There were messages about Christmas dinner, the one I'd spent across the table from Dana in my own home, where I had refilled her wine glass and asked about her mother's hip replacement, and felt genuinely happy that Marcus and I had built a life that had room in it for the people we loved. I saved everything. Priya formatted it, time-stamped, organized, cross-referenced with the hotel receipts. She sent it to my attorney, David Kwan, family law specialist with 18 years of practice in the state of Georgia, a man I had retained on a Thursday afternoon without telling a living soul, as Exhibits A through G. It's comprehensive, David told me on the phone, in the measured tone of a lawyer who has seen worse but is being appropriately serious. Admissible. The texts from the cloud backup are legally obtained since they were accessible with his own credentials from a shared account. We're in good shape, Caroline. I told him my timeline. He was quiet for a moment. The brunch is the Saturday before you file? Yes. Another pause. I'll need you to understand that what you're planning is legal but strategically unusual. Most clients prefer— I know what most clients prefer, I said. I'm not most clients. He cleared his throat. Fair enough. I'll have everything ready to file Monday morning, 8 a.m. Thank you, David. I hung up. I sat in my car in the parking garage under my office building and I let myself feel, for exactly 11 minutes, everything I had been keeping behind that door. Then I closed it again. Saturday was 6 days away. There were moments in those 6 days when the performance required of me felt genuinely impossible. The Thursday dinner, for example. Marcus had made pasta. He was a better cook than me and never made me feel bad about it, which had always been one of the things I loved about him. We sat at our kitchen table and ate, and he told me about his week and asked about mine, and everything looked exactly like our life, except that I knew, with documentary certainty, that none of it was what I had thought it was. I ate the pasta. I told him about a client issue at work. I laughed at something he said because it was actually funny, and the laughter came out naturally, which disturbed me more than anything. I thought about Derek, who had no idea. That was the thing that had been sitting in my stomach since the beginning, heavier than the betrayal itself in some ways. Derek, decent, genuinely good Derek, who was planning a wedding with a woman who had been lying to him since February. He deserved to know. He deserved not to build any more of his life on a foundation that was going to eventually collapse underneath him. He would find out Saturday. I had factored him in. I called my therapist, Dr. Angela Briggs. She's been my therapist for 4 years, a clinical psychologist with a specialty in trauma and relationship dynamics, a woman who has the useful quality of never reacting to things with surprise, and I told her what I was planning. I'm not going to talk you out of it, she said after a moment. You're not in a dissociative state. You're not making an impulsive decision, and the grief you're going to feel afterward is going to need somewhere to go. Let's talk about what you do after you walk out that door. The filing is Monday, I said. I know. I mean after the filing, after the adrenaline. What happens when you get home Sunday night and the house is quiet and you've done everything you planned and there's nothing left to plan? I hadn't thought about Sunday night. Come see me Sunday afternoon, she said. 2 o'clock. Clear your calendar. I wrote it down. Friday came. Marcus kissed me goodbye in the morning and said he had a work thing in the evening. A work thing delivered easily, without any visible effort. The way a man says something he has said enough times that it no longer costs him anything. I said okay. I spent the evening at Priya's apartment, going over everything one final time. She'd prepared a clean printed packet, the audio file on a small portable speaker, the screenshots printed in chronological order, the hotel receipts, one photograph taken outside the Biltmore Atlanta that I had specifically saved because it was unambiguous and undeniable, and frankly, because I wanted one moment on Saturday where Dana would understand that there was no version of events in which she could claim misinterpretation. You're sure about the audio? Priya asked. She'd set it up so it would play through the small Bluetooth speaker from my phone with one press. No fumbling, no technical failure, no moment of uncertainty. I'm sure about everything, I said. She looked at me for a long moment. Priya Shankar has known me for 12 years, which means she has seen me through my father's death and 2 bad relationships and a panic attack at an airport in 2019, and every version of grief and recovery I have navigated in my adult life. She knows when I'm performing calm and when I actually have it. Okay, she said, then you're ready. She hugged me. I held on for a second longer than I otherwise would have. Sunday, she said, you come straight to me. Dr. Briggs at 2. Before 2, I agreed. I drove home. Marcus was already back from his work thing. I said I was tired and went to bed early. He said, sleep well, babe. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and breathed slowly and waited for morning. Saturday. I dressed carefully, not aggressively, not the dramatic power suit of a movie montage. A cream blouse, tailored navy trousers, heels I could walk quickly in, simple gold earrings that had been my grandmother's, the kind of outfit that says, I am a composed adult woman who has her life entirely under control. I stopped at the florist on the way, bought a medium bouquet, sunflowers because Dana had always loved them, and because I had a specific cold sense of humor about the whole thing. Marcus texted at 9:47 a.m. Have fun, babe. Love you. I set my phone down without responding. Dana's house in Buckhead had the long driveway and the good light that she'd always been proud of. I pulled up behind my Aunt Lorraine's Volvo and my mother's Camry and 3 other cars I recognized, and I sat for a moment in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel, taking stock. 11 months, Christmas dinner, my birthday, our anniversary, Derek's proposal dinner at our house where she had squeezed my hand across the table and said she couldn't imagine doing this without me. I picked up the sunflowers. I got out of the car. She opened the door before I knocked. She'd seen me pull up from the window probably, and she was wearing a yellow dress and a wide smile, and for 1/2 second something in her face did the thing faces do when a thought crosses them too fast to be hidden. Something that, in retrospect, might have been guilt. Gone in an instant, replaced with warmth. Caroline, she pulled me into a hug. Her perfume was the one I'd recommended to her 2 years ago. You brought flowers. You didn't have to. Of course I did, I said, and I kissed her cheek, and I smiled, and I walked inside. The table was the long white one she'd bought at an estate sale 3 years ago and refinished herself, set for 14 people with the good wine glasses and linen napkins. Both our mothers were already seated, deep in conversation. My Aunt Celeste, 3 cousins I saw only at family events. Derek at the far end, nursing a mimosa and talking to Dana's younger brother Terrence about what appeared to be basketball. I kissed my mother. I said hello to Aunt Celeste. I made my way around the table, and I was, by every observable measure, a woman who had come to brunch. Dana floated around the room in that yellow dress, laughing too loud, touching everyone's arm, playing hostess with the particular performance of someone who is very good at making a room feel like home. She was good at it. She had always been good at it. I sat down. I poured myself a glass of wine. I waited. The room settled into itself. The soft overlap of family conversation, the clinking of glasses, plates of eggs and fruit and pastries making their way around the table. Dana took her seat at the head. Derek was to her left. My mother was 3 seats from me on the right. I let it get quiet and full and comfortable. Then I stood up. I want to make a toast, I said. 14 faces turned toward me. Warm, unsuspecting faces. My mother smiled. Aunt Celeste raised her glass slightly in anticipation. Derek looked politely attentive. Dana, at the head of the table, smiled at me with those familiar dark eyes, and I held her gaze, and I watched her read something in my expression. A flicker of uncertainty, the ghost of a question crossing her face and not quite resolving. I said, to honesty, and to the people in this room who have no idea what's been happening right under their noses. The flicker in Dana's face became something else. I placed the small Bluetooth speaker in the center of the table. I pressed play. She'll never suspect a thing. My voice. The room went completely still. The way rooms go still only when something genuine and irreversible has entered them, and everyone feels it simultaneously. Then, Marcus's voice. Saturday is perfect. She'll be at her mother's all weekend. I set down the printed packet. Screenshots, organized by date, starting January 14th and ending 3 weeks ago. Hotel receipts, 11 of them, each one dated and itemized. The photograph from outside the Biltmore, printed on matte paper, faces clear and unambiguous. I watched the room process it. My mother's hand went to her mouth. Aunt Celeste, who had known me since I was born, turned to look at her daughter with an expression I will not try to describe because I don't think language is adequate to it. The 2 cousins who hadn't yet understood looked at the cousin who had and understood. Dana's face went from pink to the particular white of someone whose blood pressure has dropped suddenly and completely. Derek. Derek pushed back from the table slowly, with the deliberate care of a man who is maintaining physical control over himself by an act of pure will. He looked at the photographs. He looked at the dates. He looked at Dana. She said his name. He shook his head once very slightly and looked away. Caroline, Dana started. Sit down, I said. She sat. The authority in my voice surprised even me. Not loud, not performative, just final. I picked up my wine glass. I finished it slowly. The good wine, a Sancerre she'd bought specifically for today because she knew I liked it, which was either an act of pure obliviousness or something more complicated that I didn't intend to spend time analyzing. I set the glass down on top of the stack of evidence. I'm filing Monday, I said. David Kwan's office, 8 a.m. You'll hear from Marcus's attorney sometime next week, I imagine. I looked down the table. Derek, she's been lying to you since February. I have documentation if you need it for your own legal situation. Call me. He didn't respond. He was staring at the tablecloth. I picked up my bag. I straightened my jacket. I stepped away from the table and I walked to the front door, and I did not look back once. Not at my mother's face, not at Aunt Celeste, not at Derek, not at any of the 14 people now sitting in the wreckage of a Saturday morning brunch. Behind me, I heard the silence break. I heard Dana say my name once, twice, then a third time in a voice that was cracking wide open. The sound of a performance finally giving way to the actual human being underneath it, which, under different circumstances, I might have felt something about. The door closed behind me. The sunlight outside was clean and sharp and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened inside. I walked to my car. I got in. I put both hands on the wheel. And then, here is the part I wasn't prepared for. Nothing happened. I had expected the adrenaline to crash immediately. I had expected tears or shaking or some form of physical release. Instead, I just sat in Dana's driveway in the clean October morning and felt something that I can only describe as a vast and perfectly silent space where 3 years of marriage used to be. I drove to Priya's. She opened the door before I knocked. She looked at my face and she didn't say anything, just stepped aside, and I walked in and sat on her couch and she made tea without asking, and we sat together in her small, bright apartment and I let it come, finally. The grief and the rage and the specific, nauseating grief that is not about the husband who cheated, but about the cousin who sat next to you at your grandmother's funeral and held your hand and looked you in the eyes. That was the one. That was the one that broke through. Priya sat beside me and didn't try to fix it. She just let me be in it. That, I think, is the definition of a real friend. Not someone who tells you it's going to be okay, but someone who understands that right now it is not okay and stays anyway. At 2 p.m., I went to Dr. Briggs. I filed at 8:06 a.m. Monday. David Kwan, family law attorney, 18 years of practice, had everything prepared and organized. The filing included exhibits A through G, plus a request for expedited review, given the comprehensive documentation. In the state of Georgia, when adultery can be demonstrated with documented evidence, it has specific legal implications for asset division. David had explained this to me carefully. I had listened carefully. Marcus was served on Tuesday at 11:22 a.m. His attorney, a man named Gerald Hughes, civil litigation background, brought in presumably because Marcus realized immediately that this was not a situation where any amount of conversation was going to make the case go away, called David that afternoon. Dana called me 17 times between Saturday and Tuesday. I did not answer any of them. I read none of the texts. My mother called on Saturday evening after she'd gotten home, and I answered because it was my mother and because she deserved a real conversation, not a closed door. She was quiet for a long time after I told her the parts she hadn't already witnessed. Then she said, "I want you to know that I am angrier at Dana than I have been at any person in my life, and I want you to know that what you did today required more courage than most people have." I told her I wasn't sure courage was the right word. "No," she agreed. "Maybe not. Maybe it was just love. The real kind. The kind that knows when it's over." Derek called on Sunday. I answered. He asked very quietly how long I'd known. I told him everything. The timeline, the documentation, the specific moments I had witnessed that I could now contextualize. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. "I want to say I can't believe she did this," he said finally, "but I'm looking back at the last 11 months and I can believe it. I think I was choosing not to." I told him I understood that. "Thank you for telling me," he said. I know it wasn't something you had to do." "Yes, I did," I said. "You deserved to know." He filed his own paperwork 2 weeks later. His attorney is a woman named Sandra Boateng, and by all accounts, she is formidably good at her job. It is 8 months later now. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. The settlement, given the documentation and the applicable Georgia statutes, was, David called it, favorable. I called it fair. I am living in the house. Marcus is not. I did not ask him to explain himself in any formal way, because I had already read the explanation 11 months of text provided, and it was sufficient. Dana and I have not spoken. I am told, through the family network that operates independent of anyone's wishes, that she and Derek are no longer together. I am told that she has moved to Nashville. I am told many things I did not ask to be told, and I receive them with the equanimity of someone who has genuinely, not performatively, stopped caring what happens in that chapter of the story. I care about Derek. He sends me a text every few weeks. Nothing elaborate, just check-ins, the kind of low-maintenance warmth that says I'm still here, I'm okay, thank you. I respond in kind. We are, improbably, something like friends. I didn't expect that. I'm grateful for it. Priya and I have standing dinner plans every other Thursday. Dr. Briggs and I meet every 2 weeks. I have started running, not for any aspirational reason, but because it turns out having a body that does something hard and physical every day is useful when you are rebuilding a life from the parts that remain. The house is quiet on Sunday mornings now. I make my own coffee. I sit in the kitchen where Marcus used to make pasta, and I read, or I work, or I just sit. And I have made my peace with the quiet, or I am in the process of making my peace with it, which is the more honest version. My grandmother's earrings are in a small dish on my dresser. I think about the Saturday brunch sometimes, and I think I was 2 versions of myself that morning, simultaneously. The woman who had loved Dana and Marcus completely, and had been completely wrong about both of them, and the woman who had already, quietly, without anyone's assistance, dismantled the lie and built the case and walked out the door. I think the second woman was always there. I think they just assumed she wouldn't show up. She should have suspected a thing.